Hi, Andreas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you on our podcast here that is AI Chronicles Going Beyond Algorithms. The intent of us doing this podcast is that we wanted to understand what are we thinking when we are building these different algorithms. We want to understand the people, processes, and possibilities that go beyond just the algorithms that get surfaced in terms of what is manifesting in as AI in the industry. We wanted to understand who are those real people, what are the struggles that they go through when they're producing these AI capabilities, and how do they overcome these struggles? What are the pivotal moments in their life that have propelled them closer towards this AI journey? So we would love to explore all of these topics with you today, and I thank you so much for coming and joining us for this podcast here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be on the show. And we've obviously been connected for quite some time, and you've been on my podcast as well. So always good to share learnings mutually with our audiences.
Absolutely, Andreas. So you are a very well-known author. You are an AI advisor. You have traversed across the corporate ecosystem as well as now a speaker and a freelancer. So we'd love to understand a little bit about your journey, your background, any pivotal moments in your life that propelled you closer towards the AI journey that you are on today, and would like to understand a little bit about your career trajectory and any key learnings that you had along the way.
Happy to share. So, look, I've been in the IT and technology space for 25 years, actually. I started very early in Germany, and I joined an IT department of a mid-sized company. And what I learned there set the trajectory for how I think about many things along my career and career path. One of the things was, how can we engineer something and put so much thought into it and test it, look at it from all different angles that we can scale it, that we can scale a piece of software to dozens, hundreds, thousands of users. And that really helped shape how I think about it. So I am always excited and curious about how can we build something that scales. So I want to see things scale. Now, when I spent a good amount of time at SAP in different roles, particularly also in the AI and machine learning space, I have that same ambition. I want to see this scale. I want us to build a product that we take to customers, not just to one, but ideally to many, to dozens, to hundreds, that then add benefit to their end users and to their customers. But it wasn't always that easy. It's not always as easy as it's just your ambition of let's build something and let's make sure it works for so many, because you very quickly run into roadblocks. It could be resources within your own department, your own company, at your customers. Right? Not everybody is on the same trajectory and not even on the same journey sometimes. So how do you overcome these obstacles, and how can you learn from them? So that was another pivotal moment, like I said, building AI solutions, figuring out what can we actually do with that technology. And now as an independent, helping business leaders figure out what do we do with AI, what should our strategy be, what are the most impactful features and products that we should be using, and most of all, how do we bring our people along on this journey, whether it's upskilling or just communicating well with them, because there's a lot of questions, a lot of concern in the workforce of what all of that brings. So I enjoy getting to help many organizations now who are asking at this pivotal moment, what should we do?
Yeah, I think we are in that particular transformative journey wherein most of the companies are investing a lot in their AI portfolio, but they are now eager to see the return on investment. Not all the AI projects are going to be successful because of the scale and complexity involved, especially now we are in a new AI wave, building a lot of agents. Last year, the industry primarily focused on heavily in terms of running different proof of concepts and testing out and piloting different ideas. And across the domain, I heard that there was a prominent theme around let's focus on productivity, let's focus on automation, let's focus on efficiency. But this year, I see that the trajectory is changing. The expectation is more around let's leverage agents to drive monetization, differentiated customer and member experience. So I see the shift happening already, and I see most of the corporates across the industry are focused more around scaling and leveraging the economies of scale.
That's the part that gets me super excited, because I think now we're starting about to talk about real impact, real business impact, real business value, hard dollars, savings, sales, customer satisfaction, right? Things like that, where it's really closely tied to the business. And I like to think about this as three concentric circles. Like you rightfully said, right? We started with this inner circle of personal productivity. Sure, I can use agents, I can use assistants to help me write emails better, summarize meeting minutes, analyze spreadsheet data, and what have you. And that's great, makes me more productive. But I think that the next layer outside of that is how can I make my team, how can I make my business function more productive? What are repetitive tasks that we do on a regular basis? Not only how can we automate them, but how can we think about them differently and rethink them now that we know what the technology can actually do? And then from there, it's what do we do as a company? How can we use the technology to drive strategic differentiation? And so for me, like you said too, it's moving to these outer layers little by little, but we have to go through this phase of experimentation and exploration to learn about what are these new tools, what are these new capabilities, what is their promise, but also where are the risks, where are the guardrails that we need to put in place, so we're not just overly optimistic putting things into the enterprise landscape to figure out, well, this actually doesn't work as intended or has some consequences that we weren't aware of. So that seems like a natural progression. And like I said, I'm excited that we're finally talking about business value again and not just how many minutes are you saving because this thing writes your email.
Right, right. Yeah. So I think that is zero sum game, and here we have got unlimited potential. That shift is gonna definitely help us move into the different orbit in terms of monetization and driving better long term value for the company and for the society. Awesome. I see that you have been interacting with multiple leaders across the industry. You mentioned your podcast. I was there on your podcast as well. So it was amazing to have that interaction. You have been interacting with hundreds of experts across the industry over the last few years. Host this particular podcast, What's the Buzz? And now it's turned out into a beautifully packaged intelligence briefing solutions that you offer. So I would love to understand a little bit about that journey, Andreas. What inspired you to that journey? What were some of the learnings that you had from the leaders across the industry, and how that helped you transform your own approach of leading AI projects or driving different AI initiatives in an advisory capacity?
So let me anchor that back in my origin story, if you will. So being in IT, building something that's practical, something that scales, because if it doesn't, you get the phone calls of people who are unhappy because something isn't
Yeah.
working as expected on Monday morning. Now, with a similar mindset, I approached starting the podcast because I had my own learnings and observations working with Fortune 100 customers, Fortune 10 customers in my corporate role at SAP. And I saw the companies that do it really, really well, that manage transformation and change and embracing AI and machine learning really well. But also, quite frankly, many of the discussions stalled at a very early phase or it didn't move forward because things weren't as much of a well-oiled machine. So I thought, well, what if the things that I've learned, what if I help others on their journey who are earlier in their journey learn about? What are the most important things about governance, about stakeholder management, about building a center of excellence? How do you scale knowledge and excitement and tech savviness across an organization with multipliers? How do you build a roadmap? How do you prioritize what's valuable? And now most recently with my latest book called The Human Agentic AI Edge, it's all about, well, you have AI in your business now and assistants. How do you get people to use it and use it well so they don't create subpar, low quality content just because we can press a button, right? We're still responsible for doing good work. And how do you manage that transition? So for me, it's all about how can I make it practical? How can I provide a platform to those leaders in the industry who are doing the work day in and day out? And quite frankly, it's also been a little bit of therapy for myself to validate where my approach is the best ones, or not even the best ones, but the adequate ones at that time, or where I failed. Did I fail because I took a wrong turn somewhere, or because maybe the deck was stacked against me, or it's just difficult and others have gone through it too. So learning there is as well a little bit how have others approached that to improve my own approaches.
Yeah. You mentioned about this book as well, right? Human Agentic AI Edge. A wonderful topic, right? We see a lot of AI applications or agents being implemented. And a regulatory framework is just catching up at this point in time. Governance ecosystem and landscape is fast evolving. We need to have that kind of a human in a loop concept when we are deploying these agents, especially if any of the outputs produced by the agents are interfacing with the end users
Mhm.
directly, right? Many a times there are unintended consequences because they hallucinate or there is no explainability. We are using these agentic outcomes in a particular context, which may not necessarily be relevant to our end users. So talk to us a little bit about what are the different aspects in your book that addresses these topics. And I believe this is your second book, right? So you
Yeah.
already have the first book. Yeah, awesome. The leadership handbook. So I would like to understand, what are you addressing in both of these different books, and what are the differentiators that you call out in your recent book?
Thank you so much. So in the AI Leadership Handbook, I cover the 9 most important aspects of bringing AI successfully into a business. So from a central leadership role, especially in large organizations that owns AI as a topic centrally, not just the technology, but also the change management, the HR aspects, security, culture, all these different aspects, to how do you then cover these respective aspects through communities of multipliers, building a pipeline for ideas, not just chasing AI as a shiny object. I had interviewed more than 60 AI leaders in the course of writing this book. Many of those were on the podcast as well. It's gotten great reviews. It's a bestseller. It's been out for about 18 months, and leaders still keep telling me, hey, this is basically the Bible of how should you run your AI program and an AI project, which is awesome to hear. And now what I've seen over the last year roughly is that organizations have brought the first AI products into their organization. Not necessarily the machine learning, statistical and analysis, predictive analytics type tools that we've had for a long time, but really the generative AI assistants now starting more looking into agentic AI. And then the question from leaders is, well, okay, now we've given everybody a license or even a pilot group. So what's the benefit? What is the return? What are we getting at the end of the day? And when I'm in leadership workshops and leadership development sessions, a lot of leaders tell me, well, the result is I get bombarded with emails. My team members are sending me all these meeting minutes, all these summaries, the action items, the bullet points, the things that we would have usually talked about in a weekly or bi-weekly one-on-one. Now I get them right after the meeting. And what am I supposed to do with it? Am I supposed to read all of this? Right? From one team member, maybe I can keep up, but I have 10, 20, 50 people, and now they're sending me all this stuff. I need a way to filter this, right? And so my approach here is to say, well, actually, as leaders, we need to guide our team members and say, yes, I want you to use AI. Absolutely, right? And I use it as well, so I have to be a role model. I want you to use it too. But let's also put some guardrails, some operational guardrails around it. Build a team charter, for example, and say, hey, here's how we want to work together. We still deliver high quality work. At the end of the day, our stakeholders within the business or even external stakeholders, investors, they don't care if this was created with AI or by hand or by one person or 5 people. They care about the quality of the result. They're not just paying for speed, they're paying for value and insight. And so let's not forget this part. So how do we do that? If we don't do it well, we end up with draft debt. Hey, here's a first draft. Can you take a look at this? Again, you don't get it from one person, you get it from 10 or 20 on your team. Creates a lot more work on you as a leader, as the reviewer. So let's not shift labor just because I can click a button. It's not my problem. I'm done. It's yours now. And how should we think about agents? There's a lot of discussion about whether agents are digital employees and whether we should view them as such. And on the contrary, a lot of people say, well, it's actually just a piece of software. And I would say, hey, take both lenses, right? Take this dual lens principle where you say, hey, agents, let's think about them as digital employees, but only in a certain sense. When it's about how do we manage them? How do we govern them? How do we give them a role description? How do we make sure they adhere to common standards and guidelines, whether it's a code of conduct or whether that's your IFRS accounting standards or whatever the specialization of the agent is? How does one agent know what other agents exist in your company that they can talk to? Right? Think of a registry, of an org chart, where we're now getting to with orchestration. So
Yeah.
it's these aspects where we bring the HR concepts at least into play and think how do we apply them to agents? But then on the other side, treat them as software when it's about ethical decisions, the final yes or no, your decision as a user, because at the end of the day, you're responsible too. So those are some of the aspects of how can you bring AI and agents into your business while keeping your employees accountable.
You bring in a very important point around designing and defining the roles of the agent, right? I believe that most of the deployments that are successful in the industry are happening primarily because we have effective rules defined to these agents, and designing the rules for these agents is the hardest part than actually building and deploying these agents at
Yeah,
scale, right? So I think if that is done in an effective manner, that's job half done. So that's going to be very important. And you also bring up another very important point around first identify what the problem is and then think of how do you want to solve that. Many a times now I see that technology teams go overboard. They're so excited about building agents for everything, and sometimes just have that kind of a bias towards using large language models, generative AI algorithms, which are bulkier in nature because they are built on transformer architecture, whereas these problems could be solved easily by rule-based algorithms, right?
yes.
So there is no need for us to use these bulky algorithms if there is no business value out of it. The simplest algorithms scale more effectively. So being more focused around what solution that we want to build and what's the problem that we want to solve will help us dictate right kind of a solutions that we want to build and deploy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's so important if you're in a technology focused role or technology focused leadership role, also to help educate your leadership and say, hey, yes, we should look at AI, absolutely. And we should try to find ways where this makes sense and where it makes business sense. But not every problem calls for an LLM, calls for an agent, calls for a model. If we can do this with rules, much faster, much cheaper. We don't need something that's overblown or over engineered. So let's also make sure we have the right KPIs that we track. At the end of the day, those should be business metrics, not just how many agents have you deployed. Those kind of incentives or those kind of goals usually drive the opposite. We need to build agents for each and everything, even though we can solve it differently and more economically.
Yeah. And in your role as an advisor, as a speaker, as an author, right? You interact with so many people from different walks of life, from corporate sector, from academia. So can you talk to me about some of the interesting and intriguing trends that you are seeing in the AI domain that you personally get excited about?
So first of all, I think there's this huge promise of agentic AI, which is great. All of a sudden, we can give a goal to these systems and they can disseminate it. They can figure out what do I need to do, what are the right steps without me as a user having to think through each of them and give it a sequential um, step-by-step list. I think that's awesome. I wished we heard from more organizations how they use it actually. I attended a number of conferences at the end of last year and I saw what some larger organizations do, but it's not the case that you hear these case studies left and right. So I'm wondering either not a lot of organizations are really doing it, lots of people are talking about it, but not many are doing it, or leaders and organizations have become a lot more careful and cautious about what they share because automating roles with AI and with agents and with digital workers sounds a little scary, isn't the best PR for many, but I think where this hinders us and hampers us is in understanding what is actually possible, what are people actually doing with it, and how can I potentially do this in my business too. So that's one thing. I wish we heard more concrete use cases, examples, and value stories of that. I've been working quite closely with different manufacturing organizations and associations and companies, and something that really surprises me there is when I give leadership trainings is the spectrum, right? On one hand, you have people that say, yeah, I've heard about it, but I'm not really sure where I should start. And you have a few on the other side. It's almost like your normal distribution. They'd say, oh, yeah, I use Cloud Code and I've built this little app for finance and we extract documents from it. Do you have a background in IT or in software development? No. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I've tried this out and it works just well. And now my boss loves me, that sort of thing. And so there's still this breadth of skills, this breadth of experimentation. And usually people are somewhere in the middle, again, normal distribution. And they say, yeah, I've tried this out. It works quite well most of the time. But now the thing is getting them to become more advanced, to use these tools as real assistants, not just as a better Google search.
Yeah.
To think about where in my business do I have a need to automate something, gather data, analyze it, look at it different ways, help me analyze, coach myself, things like that. That's for me the exciting part, really, to get over this hump of we've given everybody this tool, but now what?
Yeah. I think that's a mammoth concern and a challenge, right, across the industry. And um, it requires continuous education, hand holding, and effort. All right. Especially in the AI domain, because the domain in itself is evolving at a lightning speed. Whatever was relevant yesterday is not relevant today. Whatever is relevant today may not be relevant tomorrow. So it's the constant challenge of learning, evolving, being aware. and consciously catching up with the new and latest research that is happening in the domain.
For sure. And if I may add, so my personal approach for this is to stay abreast of the news, what's coming out, be largely aware of what's happening, right? You don't need to be an expert in every little detail. But then the approach I've been taking lately is see if this is still in the news 2 months, 3 months from now, or even 6 months from now, well, then there's something to it, right? If it's still in the news 3 months from the first time that I heard about it or read about it, okay, it's time to start looking at it more closely. And if it's still in the news 6 months from the first announcement or mention, then I should better start really experimenting with it in more detail, because it seems that this is becoming a de facto standard. So you don't want to be behind, but very few of us have the luxury of trying out all the new tools and models and things as they come out right then and there. And to your point, they might not be relevant again a week, a month, a quarter from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. To end with the last question. So, what is this specific Gen AI tool or algorithm that you use outside of your work and you're really guilty about using that?
Let me see. There are a number of tools, to be honest. The ones that I enjoy working with the most are two. One is 11 Labs, which is a voice or synthetic voice platform where you can generate your own voice clone. So at any time during the day, as long as you have an internet connection, you can type a script and it can read it in your voice. And I combine that with an AI avatar tool, HeyGen, where
Mm.
it recorded several looks, almost like this here. This is me, actually, by the way. This is still Andreas the human, not the avatar. But combining that with this high quality synthetic voice allows me to create short videos, explainer videos at 6 in the morning when I don't have to fire up the equipment, or at 10 at night when I have a stroke of genius. And most of the time, it's really good enough, right? For short social media clips, as long as it's my voice, my tone, basically, and it
Yeah.
kind of sounds like me and it kind of looks like me, it's probably pretty good.
Mhm.
So that's what gets me excited, because I can have many different looks. I can still look like I'm in California at LinkedIn Learning Studios, even though I never recorded that video there, only just
Mhm.
that input. And just that scale and trying out how are these models getting better, how is the avatar evolving, the technology underneath. I narrated the audiobook using 11 Labs as well. And it's really hard for other people to tell apart, is this really you or is this
Mhm.
your avatar? So my family, friends, a few other people that I showed it to, and I asked, well, what do you think? Who is this? Oh yeah, that's you, Andreas. And guess what? It's my voice clone. So they were
Very nice.
really blown.
Awesome. Awesome. So this is super helpful, Andreas. I think our viewers are going to enjoy listening to your overall experience derived from a humongous amount of exposure working with different leaders in the industry. Personally, I found this interaction extremely meaningful, primarily because I got to learn about how the industry is thinking about designing and defining the rules for the agent, making sure that we set the right guardrails, and now move from experimentation to that of scaling and doing that in a meaningful manner to enhance the user experiences as well as drive greater monetization. So wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And if you're in the audience, would love to learn more about it, pick a copy of The Human Agentic AI Edge.
Absolutely.
Anywhere else you can get your books. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.